Welcome to Nonprofit Stories, inspiring tales from Silicon Valley. We will explore the transformative work of nonprofit organizations and leaders who are changing our community by tackling some of the most pressing issues facing Silicon Valley. So without further ado, let's dive into this exciting conversation. Today, we welcome Vince Staub and Jill Gary from the YMCA Camp Campbell. The YMCA Camp Campbell is committed to nurturing potential, promoting diversity, and fostering a sense of belonging for all. Thank you to our sponsor, TradeMyHome.com, for their community commitment and for making this podcast possible. In Silicon Valley, the high cost of $500 per week of youth camps renders them inaccessible to 35% of lower-income families, highlighting a significant affordability issue. Additionally, less than 5% of these camps are equipped to serve children with physical disabilities, pointing to a severe gap in accessibility. Compounding these challenges, 60% of the area's youth spend over 4 hours daily on electronic devices, indicating a critical need for more engagement in outdoor activities. And now your host of Nonprofit Stories, Dee Kiso.
Vince and Jill, it is a delight to have you both here from Camp Campbell. I can't wait to dig in and learn more about it and share with our viewers.
It's good to be here, Dee. Thank you.
Really excited.
Thank you. So let's jump right in and find out, how did Camp Campbell come to be?
Well, long history. So one of the earliest nonprofits in the Valley was the YMCA, and they had a branch office down in San Jose, and they would send kids to various camps and sleepaway camps, all boys camps, and back in those days. And then in 1936, they went to a property up in Boulder Creek, and that's Camp Campbell today, and it was owned by Benjamin Campbell, for whom the property is named. So I've been doing this for 88 years.
Wow. So 88 years there. Now I understand you have a long tenure with Camp Campbell. Tell us how that started.
I do. So when I was in high school, I went to the Y to become a day camp leader. So I went through their training program. This is back in the 80s, and did my first training orientation at Camp Campbell. And so I stayed with the Y for a number of years and became from a day camp leader to a day camp director, resident camp director, and then a program director overseeing the camping programs, youth sports, family programs, and then left for a long time to do my own, finish school, start a career, and came back in 2005 to be on the board at Camp Campbell, and I have served there since.
Wow, that's quite an experience. Thank you. Now, Jill, how did you wind up at Camp Campbell, and what inspires you to do the work you do?
I came to Camp Campbell from the YMCA of Greater Boston in 2010, and what attracted me to the position was not only year-round camping, but also in a capital campaign where it really rebuilt all of camp. What inspires me is I believe that every child and family member should attend camp because of what it does to them as a person, and that's all in a natural setting of the environment right now in the Redwood Forest.
So tell me about your reach. Who all gets to benefit from Camp Campbell?
We run program from every day of most years that we have outdoor science running right now, and we have a family camp this weekend. So we have about 16 family camps for the year. And then the school year, we run childcare programs in our Boulder Creek community in San Lorenzo Valley. And we have schools come from most of the Greater Bay Area that attend Tuesday through Friday, and that's the traditional school year. And we have rental groups and weddings, and then summer camp, day camp, overnight camp, and then we start the cycle again. So 7 days a week, March through November, with a few open days around the holidays.
So Camp Campbell serves a very diverse group of people. How many students get to come through Camp Campbell every year?
Outdoor science has about 7,000. Summer camp about 2,000. And I think overall we serve about 14,000 throughout the year.
Which is very different than when they started in 1936 or even in the 80s when I was there. So science camp became a thing. So outdoor science school is, for those of you who don't know, it's the science camp that a 5th or 6th grade class will go through together. So they go up and they learn a little bit about outdoors, a little bit about ecology, a little bit about, these different things. So it's a field-based class out in the woods and using the watershed and learning about those programs. And so a lot of the schools in the area have gone to a number of places, and maybe some of them have been on your show. But Camp Campbell really does probably the best job of them all. And of course, I'm biased.
So you're wildly popular for your science camp. And earlier we were talking about how since the fires, there's a visual experience. Can you tell us about what this experience on camp can provide that you just can't get in a classroom?
I think one of the great things about being outdoors is that children can explore and families can explore on their own time. We have programs that run and teach about many different environments, but it's also for children, for outdoor science, what it means to them. And it's citizen science and it's personal learning, which is very different from classroom learning. And they're able to be asked open-ended questions like, what does this look like to you? Versus me telling, this is what it looks like to me and this is how you should remember it. So they're able to look at the environment, see how the forest is regenerating itself from the fires, see how it has affected other trees, see how the river can range from a trickle in the summer to 10 feet deep in the winter. And that's the experience that they're able to enjoy on their own. And the thoughts come from their own thoughts, and they're able to put the science principles into real life practice.
So you've gone to great lengths to make camp accessible for everyone. Can you tell us about how Camp Campbell is accessible?
So when we think about accessibility, one of the things that happens, we have these cabins that are up in the tree line, and they're up on stilts, and there's bridges that connect them. But to get to those cabins, there's a nice meandering walkway that is designed to allow people with limited mobility to get up to them. Even down at the campfire pit, there's a place for a handicap accessible vehicle that can park there, and so everyone can get all over camp. So it's designed with accessibility in mind. When the camp first opened, it was not. And so since the massive remodel that the community raised money for to really help pour into camp, it's accessible. The pool's accessible. There's a lift. There's everything that you could imagine in terms of accessibility for all kinds of people.
And I understand the swimming pool is accessible as well.
It is. It's an amazing swimming pool. And it looks like you stumbled up a giant pond in the middle of the woods, and it's got a water feature, and it's got a water slide, and it really is an amazing sight to see.
How do you make sure that Camp Campbell is affordable?
I'm going to take a stab at it, and I'm going to throw it over to Jill, because one of the jobs, so as a board member, one of our jobs is to bring in people who can become partners to camp, who become supporters of camp, and to help them to see themselves in the story of camp. So we'll do fundraising. We have an annual campaign, but we also do an auction. So we'll go out to camp and do an auction. There's a silent part of an auction, and there's a live part, and we're going to be doing that again someday. The last time we didn't do it because of the big storms that we talked about earlier, or last year. But it's raising money from the community. We'll go back to families who can afford it and say, hey, can you help send more kids to camp or more families? But also bringing in new partnerships, people who just believe in the value of camping, the value of families and children being outdoors, learning on their own time, learning in the woods. One of the differences that we have that a classroom doesn't is a river. There's not many rivers that go through many classrooms or redwood trees. And so those are some of the things that we have that differentiates us from a classroom, including the experiential learning. So we'll partner with people to help us send kids to camp, because we really believe in that. We actually believe that no one should be left behind. Talk about science camp a little bit. There are entire schools who can't go because they can't afford to send all of their fifth graders to science school, or there could be a child within a fifth grade class who couldn't afford it in some school districts, so they stay back while everyone else goes to science camp, and they miss that shared experience. They miss the opportunity. And so that's one of my passion points, is to make sure that we can get the whole classroom, every classroom, up to science camp. And think there's a waiting list now. I'm going to pitch back over to Jill for the fine points.
So we have a financial aid program for all of our programs, whether it's aquatics and swim lessons or childcare, but it's also summer camp, day camp, and outdoor science. Our Title I schools in California have a lower rate so that we're able to provide financial aid for those schools in need. And families apply for financial aid, and we typically give out $165,000 a year for families that can't afford to send their kids to camp or can't afford to attend camp themselves. And our philosophy is we want everybody to be able to attend camp. And if the stumbling block is financial, then let us help you.
Interestingly enough, we don't always bring in that kind of money from donations. And so it's coming out of the operating cost of camp, which Jill is willing to do because she believes in the mission that much. And so as a board, we go out and we look for opportunities and funding opportunities to bring more kids to camp. We'd love to have that, every kid come to the camp regardless. And money should never be the object or the barrier.
Let's talk a little bit about your board, because your board is unique in that they are not afraid of fundraising and they're not afraid of community involvement. And I sometimes call it the Chicken Little versus Paul Revere. How have you gotten your board so on board to do this work with passion?
As with any board, you would have a group who are gung-ho, ready to go, and some who are a little bit more reticent. And so when we encourage board members, when they're joining, when we're talking to people about board joining our board, we'll say there's a give and get, right? So you can, if you want to whip out your checkbook and write a check for the whole thing, that's great. Otherwise, we'll partner with you and provide some contacts for you. People who are warm to the YMCA, have been in the YMCA programs, have gone to camp, and help raise that. So it's a give or get kind of a situation. But we also talk about it in terms of if they're not saying no to you who's asking for a donation, they're saying no to a kid. So it's not you. So when we turn that conversation into saying, no one wants to pay for toilet paper, so we're not asking people to raise money to pay for toilet paper. 100% of what we raise goes to send people to camp, go into our fitness programs, go into our science camp, go and do all of these programs. So when we have that conversation, it makes it a little bit easier that the individual requester doesn't feel like they're being rejected. And I can ask anybody all day long if they would help send a kid to camp. And that's an easy ask. And so that's what helps board members kind of get over that reticence to go out and ask for money. For many of them, they've been in program. They absolutely have firsthand experience. They've come from program because they were in family camp. Their kids went to camp. They go to family camp. And so they absolutely see the vision that we absolutely see.
So I was going to say, they experienced it themselves.
Yeah.
They know the experience, they enjoyed the experience, and they're able to tell their story. And for us, we also use that time for fundraising to have them share their story, because many people have a YMCA story, which is asking them to share it.
A typical problem homeowners have when wanting to buy a new home is whether to sell first or buy first. Either way is risky. When ready to look for a new home, TradeMyHome.com, powered by Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, offers an upfront guaranteed cash offer on your current home. Are you moving in the next 3 to 6 months? Text PAIR to 408-740-7400 for a free and no-obligation professional equity appraisal report, exclusively for Nonprofit Stories podcast viewers. For more information, visit TradeMyHome.com or call 408-740-7400. Remember, at TradeMyHome.com, your home is sold guaranteed or we'll buy it.
So why do you suppose that Camp Campbell is one of the ultimate student experiences that Silicon Valley children talk about for years?
I think they're able to see redwood trees for the first time. They're able to hike 5 miles in a week for the first time. They're able to be with their friends. They're able to get dressed on their own. They're able to get themselves ready for the day and be able to go out and conquer the world. And I think by doing that, it builds a stronger person.
And in terms of aesthetics, it's a beautiful place. It is a gorgeous place, that huge log cabin style dining hall, big vaulted ceiling, carved animals. As you get to camp and you're crossing the bridge across the San Lorenzo into camp, there's carvings, there's honed logs. It's a gorgeous place from the very second you step on property. And then you go to the cabins, and they are phenomenal. And to be in this treetop village, looking out your window into trees, or coming out of that door and just looking out into the vastness of the trees, it feels like you're a million miles up in the air. You're not, but you feel like you are. And then every cabin, every bunk has its own little cubby. Every bunk, you can tuck away, and it's your own little place, a little reading light if you want to read. The bathrooms are right there. It's not a rustic camp. It used to be. Back in the 80s when I was going, it was rustic, and you have to go to the shower house and walk across the tan bark or whatever, and in our flip-flops, and get our toes jammed on sticks, but they have their own bathrooms. It's really a phenomenal place. And then I'm going to talk about Jill for a second, like she's not here. And Jill has absolutely made it her mission to make every usable space something that will benefit our clients, our members, our participants, including finding a place to have an axe throwing area, right? So a big chain link fence, safe area, a basketball court. We can do pickleball on it. We can do roller or street hockey. There's all of these places that became program areas, and it's a well-used camp, and every little area. That's what makes it different, and that's why it's so special.
Now that you're back to those pre-pandemic numbers, what are some of the challenges that Camp Campbell has, like digital media and other distractions, to bring the whole person to the experience?
I think staffing is a challenge. I think what children have gone through has caused a situation where they really don't feel comfortable having conversations with people. And whether that's young people or whether that's high school students or whether that's some of the staff, that the social interaction didn't happen for years. And as they were forming ways to have positive social interaction, they missed out on it. And so we're dealing with that daily at camp. And I think being able to facilitate learning for staff and campers, helps everybody. And being able to find the staffing to be able to maintain our full program has been a little bit of a challenge.
And then on the flip side of that, the fact that kids were not being social for several years, and some of our staff did college from their bedroom on Zoom, and they didn't have that engagement. That's a challenge that camp helps to overcome. I think camp is an equalizer. I think when you're learning, you're passing the food around the table, when you're taking turns setting up the table, bussing, being hopper, all of those things help to break down those deficits that formed over a 2 or 3 year period. We talk about STEM, which is important to me. Just being able to to look out the window and see that's an organic garden, and some of that food is likely going to be on my plate in about 3 hours, and make that connection. I think that's part of what camp overcomes in those deficits. And it's space, and you're outdoors, and the mask issue is what we're outside. It's going to be an okay thing. We're going to run around. We're going to do our thing. It's going to be safe. And so I think overcoming the perception of that has been a challenge. You go up there now, you wouldn't ever know that COVID even happened. And so we are back to pre-COVID numbers, and that's been an exciting time because it was tough during that COVID time for staffing, for people to send their kids to camp, all of those reasons, and we've actually bounced back. Thank you, Jill.
Well, let's go a little deeper on that. So you've seen a lot, and have there been changes over the years on how people and generations enjoy camp?
You talk a little bit, Jill, about East Coast camping versus West Coast, because I don't think everyone appreciates the family tradition on the East Coast.
Okay. I come from the East Coast, and I started camping when I was 10. And I went to the same camp that my stepfather attended and my 2 older brothers attended. And then I went there and grew up there. and then worked there and then moved out here. And one of the big differences is that it's somewhat of an inevitability. That's what you do during the summer. You go to camp. And the choices and options out in California, it's just very different. So we had a lot of 1-week sessions. And we still have some 1-week sessions, but the quality of a 2-week experience, personally, I feel is much, much better. Because some children who have a hard time, and even some parents have a hard time sending their kids to camp, by Wednesday of that week, it's over. But they finally just got comfortable and everything's grooving. So the 2 weeks session, the amount of maturity that happens, parents notice it after 2 weeks when they're picking up their children far more than 1 week. But we'll never get away from the 1-week sessions. It's also a great introductory to camp for a lot of families. But the choices that children have for outdoor activities is just vast. So being able to stress the social component helps with that. So I think that core hasn't really changed, but being able to do activities that you wouldn't necessarily do with your friends, make new friends that become your camp friends, that become friends for life, you're able to do that. So that hasn't necessarily changed, but being able to be comfortable and having parents be able to be comfortable so that they will have others take care of their kids, that continues to be a bigger struggle. And especially with technology, parents and families and even children are more comfortable constantly communicating. So when you take them out of that element and they're not able to communicate, there's a very high anxiety level on both sides of that equation. So what we try to do is get the information tours ahead of time so they know where they're coming and the parents know and can meet the staff so that the comfort level is higher. So I would say that piece is probably very different.
So we've had quite a bit of weather challenges up in those Santa Cruz mountains between weather and fire. How's camp holding up?
Camp is great. I think we have 7 generators and 22 propane tanks. So not a lot of times, except for the hum of a generator, do the participants even know when the power goes out. So that part is great. And I think with all of the improvements that we did with the capital campaigns, it holds a lot of water. So there's not standing water. It gets to the river, and kids are doing activities indoors and outdoors. So right now, camp is doing great and still have a lot of the trees.
So the fire did come into quite a bit of your acreage. Can you just briefly tell us what the difference is and how maybe nature is actually taking over as you're coming through this?
One of the opportunities I was able to enjoy was learning what to do after a forest fire. I know that even during construction, you could spread seed so at least it holds the ground. So most of the fire hit the part of the property that's on a hillside away from all of the cabins. And through all the different parks and rec and government agencies, they're like, don't touch the forest. I learned that redwood trees need fire to regenerate. And I also learned from the fire chief that there's still a lot of fuel in the forest. So what we've been able to do is start removing a lot of the fuel, teaching campers of all ages what the forest fire did and how our hiking trails, I believe, helped save camp because that's what the firefighters used to stop the flames. And now it started 2 weeks after when we were able to go back. The first green that you saw in a sea of ash and burnt stumps was ferns. And they somehow regenerated, and there's definitely light in different parts of the forest, and there's definitely trails that have had to be moved or adjusted because of downed trees. But through all the experts, we're leaving the forest alone, and we'll watch it regrow.
I think it's worth noting that there was a group of firefighters from San Jose who came up to camp to make a stand. The camp was so important to them in their life that they said, not on our watch. And so they sat there and the fire did come close to camp. Don't want to scare people away, but It did, and it was because of the efforts of the firefighters that it just went the other way. So that was amazing. Subsequent to that, groups have been able to go up and work alongside Jill's staff. We had volunteers come up. I brought a group up from my company. We all came up and we cleared the fuel out. Wide trails are a great thing, not just for a lot of kids, but because they're a good fire break. It's a good thing for fire equipment to be able to get up. So there's always opportunities for people to come and learn about what's going on in our forest, but also to help do some service work and really give back and support kind of that regeneration of our forest.
Why should families make more time to spend at camp?
Our forest needs it. So I've had this conversation with a couple of you, but I have gone to too many restaurants, too many events where I've seen every family member head down on their phone, on their device. Kids are on iPads, parents are on social media doing whatever they're doing, and there's no conversation going on, or very little. And so, or people aren't paying attention when they go to camp and there are no electronics, maybe for a picture or two. Now they're kind of forced into the conversation, and then we'll actually at times create opportunity, even more opportunity. Little jar, pull out a piece of paper. Tell me about the first time you ever went to the woods, right? Those kinds of things where we can actually encourage those conversations and actually deliver more of the mission of the YMCA at those meals. Sitting at a big table with 8 or 10 people, great opportunity. Going on hikes, getting away from the screens, getting away from the electronics, getting away from the blue screen. Those things are really important and will have a much longer impact on those family relationships than those screens. Jill?
And I think children are really scheduled. There's a lot of activities that they have to go from point A to point B, and there's not a lot of downtime. And I think for family camp, families are able to come up, park their car, and they don't need to get into it for two and a half more days. And they're able to have as structured or as unstructured time as they want, but they're able to spend time doing an arts and crafts project together, or doing a wood project together.
Or be silly.
Or just do a skit and sing. And I think it's having the conversation and actually having family meals. And at that point, it's 6 meals that they'll have together. So that doesn't necessarily happen on a regular basis because of how scheduled people are. And that's one of the unofficial added bonuses to spending time at family camp.
Your words, Vince. $1 can help a child, and $1 million can help a community. If somebody watching this show today were to come to camp and hand you $1 million, I know you already know what you would do with it. What would that be?
With $1 million, my fiscal responsibility says I would do an endowment for camperships. And so we put that $1 million in the bank, grow it, and the money that comes back in terms of interest, it's going to pay for kids to go to camp. Because I think people should go to camp. Not just kids. I always say kids because that pulls on people's heartstrings, and that's my passion. But families need to be together in camp, family camp, mothers with their kids, fathers with their kids, Women's Wellness Weekend. They all need these opportunities. And so I would do an endowment to help pay for people to come to camp.
I want to thank you both so much for being here, telling us all about Camp Campbell, the benefits, and how do we stay in touch and find out about some of these upcoming events so we can be a part of that too.
Follow us on Facebook. So Facebook is a great way. We have Camp Campbell Facebook page. Our website is a great way to do it. Signing up for newsletters, getting involved, reaching out if you want to participate. Maybe you want to be on the board. Maybe you want to be on a steering committee. Maybe you want to have be part of a task force or something like that. We would love for the community to get involved. We talk about our community. If you're at a branch YMCA, your community might be a city, right? Or 2 cities. In the case of the Northwest Y in Cupertino, there's Sunnyvale and there's Cupertino. For us, our community, it's the Bay Area, and even a little bit more than the Bay Area. So we're looking for opportunities to represent our community when we do our camp programs and when we have our board meetings and when we're really talking about what does camp need. Does it need more arts and crafts? Does it need more access? Or both? So thank you, Dee Dee, for having us. Thank you for what you're doing here with nonprofits, and it's really an important time right now that nonprofits are able to step up and stand in the gap, because there's so much need out there. So thank you for what you do.
You're welcome.
Here's a sneak peek of the next episode of Nonprofit Stories, featuring Dr. Yuli K. Chittipalli, a renowned figure with over 2 decades in emergency medicine.
When I became a physician and I was training, emergency medicine is exciting, right? You see all kinds of things walk in or sometimes roll in to the emergency.
An award-winning physician, innovative researcher, and entrepreneur, founder of Sirica Therapeutics and Innovator MD.
After doing that for several years or several decades, you start to get burnout. And also, I was looking at problems that keep recurring.
Check out our next full episode on Wednesday at 5 o'clock Pacific and 8 o'clock Eastern on YouTube and Apple Podcast. Thank you for listening to the podcast and acknowledging the impactful work of nonprofits in Silicon Valley. Please subscribe and share this episode with a friend. Thank you to our sponsor, TradeMyHome.com, for their community commitment and for making this podcast possible. Until next time, remember to support local nonprofits.